and welcome to Calendar Studios. I'm Andrew Dunn. I am one of the directors of the studio, and I'm here with our local MP, John McNally. John, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation, Andy. A pleasure to be here.
So, we've got Volunteer Week on the 1st of June, and my first question is, how would you say volunteering helps, the community, and how much does the community rely on volunteers?
It's a great question. It's a truth to say that volunteers are sometimes in our community, they become accidental activists. Sometimes they're unseen, sometimes they're unrecognised, and they can certainly be undervalued by the amount of work that they put into their local communities. So, yes, I see it's lots of good things happening in our local community, and the volunteers, the active volunteers in and around their community should be highly valued and should be recognised.
I like what you said there, where they are accidental activists, you said, because I did some volunteering at the Strathcarron charity shop down in Bainsford, and that was a pure accident. I went in one day and I just had a wee look, and I noticed their little staff door was open, and they had what I thought was like a video tripod. It turned out to be for a telescope, but I was allowed to go through the back. Noticed they had a few cameras, and obviously they weren't too sure how to price them, but obviously that's what I work with. So Malcolm, who was one of the guys who runs the internet side of the department, so they sell online, he was like, "Oh, do you want to, give us a hand if you can?" I thought, "Oh, I'd love to." And you get to see so many really cool things that people donate, and you see, we've seen old 1940s like movie projectors, and you had the receipts from the guy who bought it in a store in Glasgow and Sauchiehall Street. It was really fascinating. There's a lot of history that goes
You
through
got the whole history of something in the background.
Exactly, and I think with volunteering, it obviously gives people a sort of foot in, sort of like invest in a sense. It kind of gives them a kind of idea of what they're getting into, and then they can fully invest if they're comfortable with it.
Well, that's a very important point, Andy. What you've said is basically serendipity doesn't just happen by accident. You have to have an incident that you can say, well, I'm looking for something or I'm interested in something, and you're sort of naturally drawn to these things. But you're a great example of somebody that's young and involved, a good active mind. And it helps the community at large, as well as developing your own skills to develop your own self. And then you find out more about yourself and what you're about, what your interests are. And in your case, the description you've given about the cameras and the history of them, it's an invaluable insight.
Do you feel like volunteering in and of itself is more of avenues they can go down rather than limitations?
Yes, exactly that. And it goes back to the point about learning more about yourself, becoming more involved with people, speaking to people that have got similar interests, for example, is very, very important. So you're presented with some problems. You learn the soft skills, how to get up in the morning, how to present yourself, how to get out and about and work in your own community. The main benefit of working in your own community is you actually see the results of that immediately. And having an insight into what goes on in your local community. So you start to notice things, you start to pick up on things, and that's the most valuable thing you can get. How does it work for a younger person? Well, when you go for a job and it's on your I would call it a magna vitae, because it's not just about a CV, it's how you develop the wider aspects of your skills. And your mental skills, your personal skills, your social skills, your interfacing skills, and how you speak with one another. And then for older people, as you get older, sometimes you've got life experiences. You don't necessarily have to have a particular profession that you can take in to another area of work or community work. It could be something entirely different. I know many of accountants that have got involved in community work, but they don't want to do the bookkeeping work. They want to get involved in different ways, refresh their brain, and that's another fine example of how people get involved in communities at all stages in their life. And let's face it, hopefully, none of us want to get too old, but something we always want to achieve as we get older. We want to stay healthier and fitter. And many of the people I know that I've met in the local community, lots and lots of them are retired. They became activists in different ways, but they've all had a common interest in helping their own community. So the self-help thing, identifying what you need to do yourself, see a problem, you think it's a problem, find out if something exists, and then become involved in that.
For a lot of young people, they see a lot of stuff online, like the world's issues are somewhat more important. And I think from what you're saying, the importance of starting with community can lead to bigger issues that some individuals might want to tackle going further down the line.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I always think that for a long, long time, if you want to change the world, you get busy in your own little corner, and there's a natural progression then from your own little corner into how the world works in a better place. And sometimes, as you know, or you will learn, it becomes a bit frustrating in the wider world when you don't have the same influence or see the results. It becomes very frustrating. Sometimes it's like throwing a wee table tennis ball against a concrete wall. You're hoping to make a breakthrough, whereas locally, you can help other people. And that could be local schools, community groups, tenants groups, all sorts of different groups are out there. So the idea of the volunteer week is to highlight and to recognise. And the volunteer week, as you've said, starting on the 1st of June was an opportunity in volunteer in Scotland to go and look at the different sites that are available, especially in the Falkirk and Forth Valley area. So there's an opportunity for people there to say, actually, let's try and get some involvement here. What can we do? Could be in your local street, your own neighbourhood, anything at all.
During the pandemic, that was a time when people were sort of, for the first time in a long time, I think, starting to get more familiar with their communities. Obviously, where I was from, I know both my neighbours, but for a lot of people, you know, it was kind of sometimes the first time they got to properly speak with their neighbours. You know, what's your thoughts on how you've seen, for example, your community or other communities sort of come together during and after the pandemic, and what has that led to in the communities?
There's an awful lot to think about there. I mean, during the lockdown of COVID, people were going through their own personal tragedies. Obviously, they were losing loved ones, families, friends, and I had many instances, even with my own friends that I grew up with. I couldn't go to the funerals. I couldn't attend things that I would have, and it was a tragic time during those absolutely dark days. What the lesson that's learned from it is that, as you rightly said, people looked at one another, looked at their own neighbours. If they realised they were vulnerable because people were staying at home, they weren't going to work. The sort of 8 till 6 at night thing was came to an abrupt end for a lot of people. There were still people who had to work, obviously, during that time. But what it did do was it made people more aware of other people's situations, and you become more and more aware of young families, maybe that were vulnerable, elderly people that were terrified to get out. So they got involved in doing the simple things like shopping, maybe cutting their grass, doing the things that they maybe couldn't do themselves. There were families who had vulnerable people within their own families, so people were lending a hand to what can we do. So that question about what can I do to help someone else if I'm in a situation that I can do that. First of all, you had to look after your own self, your own body, make sure you were fine and abiding by the rules as much as you possibly could. And then being able to offer that help to other people was a great sense of relief and provided a great peace of mind to other people and other families. And I think that was the biggest single thing that's came out. And the side issue to that as well was, I think, that probably won't be ever be measured properly, but the fact that you were going to help other people, other families, and a side issue, you were helping the medical profession, you were helping the teaching profession, you were actually helping people in shops and various other ways, and making sure all of these things were functioning properly or as best as they could in that time. So there was another issue, apart from helping the immediate person, immediate neighbour or whatever else, you were also helping a bigger, to the public side of life, the social side of life. You were in another way, you were helping them out as well by relieving the pressures, the mighty pressures that were already on them.
Another thing is with this cost of living crisis as well, that's another chance where we're getting a similar COVID situation, but there's no social distancing rules, everything's somewhat back to normal. And I think
That's a very, very, very good point.
I think now is a good time for people to get the chance to socialise, even though we're still in a tough time. I think that's a good thing to have, because during that pandemic, as you say, a lot of people had personal battles, and I think the personal battle of you know, your mental health is really for a lot of people that was their that was the main thing that hurt them the most, you know.
Indeed, he was. Again, you've made very, very good points, and it's good to be able to talk about these things and discuss what's actually happened. And you're absolutely right. Again, the cost of living crisis brings us all back to the volunteering week. How can we help one another to survive this and relieve some of the stress that's on other people? And apart from the feel-good factor that you have within yourself for doing something good, It's you're witnessing what's happened, the impact you're having on other people, and how actually there is someone out there caring for us. There is someone willing to help, and you don't have to rely on everybody else's services all the time. You can work for one another, and that self-help thing starts with, as I said, it starts with yourself. How can I help other people? And then you meet other people, and you find finally somewhere along the line all starts to connect up. You think this is actually quite good. So if you can get involved in something locally, or wherever you work, whether you're at college, whether at university, I think or particularly the schools is a great place to start. When you get involved in, whether it's an allotment society or planting your own things, that community starts at home and at the school. And you try to make people more aware of that. So, if you see someone that has some sort of specialism or an interest, it might be making films, it might be recording, it might be audio, might be whatever they call that thing now you do with mixing, is it?
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. And I think as well, if, for example, what you mentioned about what we do here with the filming and the sound and the music, what me and Andy do with the Century Centre, we open that up to children who are hard of hearing. But Andy is hard of hearing, he has hearing aids and he DJs. And it's to, tell these kids, listen, you might not have the best hearing, but Stevie Wonder's blind and he's one of the greatest piano players.
That's a very practical example of how you can reach out and help other people. And it also provides, I think, importantly and quite topically at the moment, sadly, but it provides a resilience to the community when they start working with one another. And I'm referring to the setting fire to the all-weather surface at Dunny-Pace Juniors Club, which is a tragedy. I don't know why people have done anything like that. And but what it has proven is that once again the community has got together, providing a fundraising exercise, and I think at the last count it was up towards £20,000 since the week past Friday. So that's the benefit of having a local community. They work together, they appreciate the work of the volunteers, and although it was a tragedy, that community will come back.
Yeah,
And the youngsters that were involved, they were interviewed on the news, Sky News, as well as the chairman, and the children spoke very eloquently, and I think that was a lesson for them about how a community works, and they will get that back together. Of that, I'm absolutely sure.
Well, John, thank you very much for coming in and being interviewed by us today.
It's my pleasure, Andy, and grateful to you once again for providing this wonderful facility.
Thank you. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.